أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am going to check to make sure that we are streaming live. This is the first time I'm using this new software, so bear with me, please. Um, if you can write a comment to let me know that you can hear me, that you can, yeah, okay, I can see myself, so I'm good. As I said, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Let's begin with a couple of prayers. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. I am so excited, you guys. It is such a joy and pleasure. I have been waiting for a few days to conduct this interview. It is with Leena El-Ali, and the author of this book. You can't see it because it's like mirror effect, but it's No Truth Without Beauty, a beautiful book, God, the Quran, and Women's Rights. When I was introduced to Leena, I was super excited. I love this book. We're going to be talking about what prompted her to write this book, her journey since then, and all other issues related to women's rights. And you can post your comments, you can write your comments, questions. And please remember that this book is available on Amazon. We are going to remind you several times during this talk to get your copy on Amazon today, whether it's on Kindle or like what I got, a hard copy. I got it on Kindle and a hard copy because I like holding a book. And then make sure once you have read this book to go and write your review. This is how we can support our dear sister, Leena. And I want to share a couple of words before I introduce Leena to you guys. Why this is so exciting for me, because as you guys very well know, I'm a big supporter of women's rights, especially Muslim women's rights, especially with balance, keeping in mind that this is not a fight where we want to discard or disregard men or make them our enemy, but rather trying to understand the truth about the message of Islam, trying to understand the truth about our beautiful book, Quran, and about the Sunnah of our dear Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when I found this book, I was so happy because this is a book written by someone who also loves Islam and who has a deep understanding and a desire and a passion to understand the truth and what God is trying to say in the Quran. So without further ado, I want to say hello. I want you guys to say assalamu alaikum to our dear guest, Leena El-Ali. Hello, we can hear you now. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. What a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Iran.
It is a pleasure and an honor for me, Leena. And I just want to do a quick shout out to one of our loyal followers, Maliha Sultana. So a quick shout out to Maliha for introducing us. She has been one of those followers who always is asking questions, which I love, and has been committed really to finding the truth about Islam. She has a lot of fear. She had a lot of questions, what she calls religious OCD, and then one day she posted a comment where she was saying, she calls me Iramanti, and she said, Iramanti, I read a book and she sounds so much like you. I want to introduce you to her. Please go and read this book. And that's how we were introduced to each other. So I want to say thank you to Maliha for making this introduction. And as my gesture of gratitude, I'm going to gift you a free session with me. So just reach out to my team and they will set it up for you. Okay. So thank you again. And now let's get started. So tell me a little bit about what prompted you to write this book, Leena. Tell me about your background. Share with us what was going on in Leena's life that she was moved towards writing this book.
Thank you, Eram. Thank you. And I also want to give a shout out to Meliha. She wrote to me. We had a couple of email exchanges, and I want to thank her also for introducing me to you. I'm delighted to be here. It really is an honor. It's an honor, and it's a great pleasure always to talk about things that one cares about. And in this case, I know I'll be talking about things that are incredibly dear to my heart, to people who hold them equally dear. So that is a very special circumstance. Um, so a little bit about myself, so that you hopefully understand a little bit more about what led me to write this book. I'm from Lebanon. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, giving away my age here, at a time when, in general, Muslims in the Middle East and other Muslims, I hadn't come across too many people from outside the Middle East at that time. I was still a sort of a teenager, a young teenager, and then later teenager. Um, but people in general, as far as I knew and I felt, were very comfortable with their Islam, whether it's my immediate community, Lebanese community, or the wider community in my country and elsewhere. I also grew up partly in West Africa, where there was a substantial Lebanese community. Everyone was very much of a believer. Everyone was very proud of their heritage. There were varying degrees of knowledge about one's religion amongst the people I knew and the people around, but nobody questioned anybody else's views or depth of belief or degree of belief. Nobody seemed to have an interest in sort of grading someone else's belief, and everyone was very comfortable. I mean, there was a lot of respect, a lot of pride in our religion, etc. And then everything changed, and I want to say it started to change probably more towards the late 80s, that I started to become aware of this sort of push for everyone to conform, is the best way that I can describe it. To conform in terms of thinking about Islam and various things about Islam, or conform in clothing and the way people dressed, whereas before nobody sort of got into that. Some people, now we're talking about women specifically in this case, but for as long as I can remember, some people wore the headscarf, the hijab, and some people didn't, and nobody would ever go there and want to sort of challenge someone who did or challenge someone who didn't, because you get people from both sides, right? So I saw the world begin to change, and there was an increasing push to sort of wear one's religion on one's sleeve, as it were, or sort of have it, as I often say, like tattooed on our heads. So this is what we believe, and this is, and it became a very, very different thing. And of course, what we have seen since then, and I think we've experienced this in every single Muslim society around the globe, what we have seen is an increasing sort of push by not just the authorities and the institutions, but our own communities, even our informal structures, a push to kind of regulate things and streamline things, and have only one version of things,
Or one interpretation, yeah, of
or
that
one
version.
interpretation, and so on and so forth. And what as that has happened, also one thing that I started to notice, as now, by then I was like in my 20s, 30s, 40s. I won't keep going, but at the same time, Islam started to appear in the public domain, unfortunately, in less and less favorable light, shall we say. And so all of the things that I had always associated with it that were beautiful, what I had understood and how I had felt, suddenly it's as if the beauty had been stripped from it little by little, little by little. And it was it was like the mirror image, the other side of the coin to this push to want to make everyone the same.
Mm.
And this business of trying to make everyone think the same, speak the same, even speak the same, even
Mm-hmm.
speak the same. Suddenly there were all these formulae that one had to abide by and pepper one's conversation with
Wow.
in order to be considered, um, you know, halal enough, I suppose. And it became, the spontaneity was in a sense being also stripped away from us, and that really broke my heart because I grew up in an environment where no one tried to teach me religion. It was just there in the environment. It was just absorbed. It was almost by osmosis. You just got the values, you got the principles, you understood what was important and what wasn't. And there was beauty. There was beauty all around in every sense, in fact.
Mm.
And I'm going on a little bit here, but I think it's important to set the
Please
stage
do.
for where
Please.
I'm coming from.
Yeah, please do.
And it really, I'm coming from a place of love, is the bottom line, and quite a bit of heartache, I will admit, at having seen the beauty stripped away
Mm.
over time.
Yeah.
For the most part, in the public sphere, in the mainstream, etc. So now, to find that beauty, we really have to go find very special communities or individuals who have been able to preserve it,
Yeah.
or who are able to because they have the freedom to, or because of their circumstances, etc.
Mm.
So I I should say upfront that I did not study, Islam or Quranic studies or anything of the like at university. I studied economics. I don't claim to be a scholar or an expert. But when this idea to write this book came about, I was very aware of that. I resisted doing it for a long time. I felt that, you know, people might say, well, who are you? What have you studied? What have you not studied? I went and worked in finance for over a decade, and then I became a business entrepreneur. This is all back in London. Then I moved to the United States, and I went to work for an NGO in conflict resolution and peace building. And actually, it was there through that work that I started to travel around the world and visit different communities, Muslim communities, and interact with them, beyond my Lebanese and sort of nearer Middle Eastern a background that I had grown up with, which had also changed dramatically. And I started to get a sense of really how much things had changed, and at how many different sort of alarming um, sort of myths there were
Mm.
around women in particular, around our religion in general, to be fair and honest, but around women in particular. Very A lot of very restricting, demeaning, um, at times, views, and that's where the desire to do something about it started to come up. I'll stop there for a second because I know it's a
I just want to make a couple of comments because I resonate so much with what you're talking about. In a different experience, of course, because I was in a non-Arabic speaking country. I was born and raised in Pakistan. And I remember, Lena, when I was about 7, 8 years old, is when this version of Islam that you're talking about, the rules based version, started to enter our lives. I remember my mother, may God bless her and may God increase her darajat, I mean, uh, had beautiful hands and feet. I will always remember that. She used to wear nail polish on her feet, and she had beautiful feet. And she went to this lady's house one day who was, preaching the version of Islam that you're talking about. And I remember she came home and she said, "Oh my God, Oh my God, I did not know I was breaking so many rules of Islam, and may God forgive me. And then my mother started to change. And for me, I still remember because it was such a stark departure for her that, she started to veil herself and stuff. And of course, she would never wear nail polish after that. But Islam became, uh, faith became very harsh after that for me. It was about all these rules that you had to follow, and if you made a mistake you were in so much trouble, and there was just this constant mention of how you can just go to hell for this and that. So what happened to me, to this young, the brain of this young girl who was ever so curious and ever so rebellious, um, that I started to develop a very resentful relationship with God. As you mentioned, there was no beauty. It didn't even make sense a lot of times, but there were just rules that if you asked why, and I was one of those people who always asked why, if I was told to do something or to not do something, I always had a why. And the answer just used to be because God says so in the Quran. So you have to do it this way. So I didn't get a lot of reasoning and explanations. And I remember, Lena, that before that, because my dad was always, um, a Muslim who had a lot of iman and faith. And he would go to the mosque. We lived in Kuwait, by the way, at that time. And he would go to the mosque for his Jamaat, for his prayer. And I was so into it that I would go with my dad dressed as a boy. I would cry. I would make my mom, so she would have to pin up my hair. It was like this, it was always thick and long. So she would put all these bobby pins in my hair, and I would put that prayer cap. And by the time I was in second sajda, of course, my hair would come piling down. It would be, and of course, I would be praying next to my dad. So all the men knew that I'm his daughter. And they were just so sweet. And, they would just be, it was just a cute thing for a young girl to be doing with her dad. And but it all changed. It all became very harsh. I started secretly resenting Islam until, as I've shared with my followers, that by the age of 18, I declared to God that I hate you and I am never going to love you no matter what. I understood that there was a powerful being, that somebody controlled the universe for sure, but I just had such hatred and resentment. And of course then, things changed later on, and now, like you, which we will get to in a minute, I call Allah Ta'ala my best friend, and I fell in love with him again. But this harshness of rules that stripped the beauty away, is what caused me to turn my back almost on Islam. I was this close to just leaving it forever, and we'll talk about why I didn't. But so I resonate a lot with what you're talking about, that things started to change so much. And there were rules, and everybody had to follow that set of rules, or you belong to this set of rules, or you belong to this set of rules. And whichever sect you belong to, you got to follow their rules without question. And for women, they were all especially harsh, all of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanted to also comment. So if you guys watching, if you want to comment, I will be checking them from time to time. I want to make sure that we leave the questions till the end. So one of the things I loved about your book, Lena, was that, like myself, you were not a scholar of Islam. You're not, you don't claim to be a scholar. You haven't really done any structured studying in that, yet you felt empowered enough to write this type of a book, which, by the way, I have to tell you guys, when you read it, it doesn't feel like it's written by a layperson. Your research is exceptionally good, and your reasoning is beautiful. I just enjoyed so much. And you enjoy the level of research that has gone into it, and your logic is very sound. So the fact that, number one, a layperson, and number two, a woman can just say, you know what, I have the right to interpret Quran and I'm going to write a book about it. So talk to me about that. What gave you that courage?
Well, again, it goes back to the fact that I was raised at a different time, and it makes me feel really bad, to be honest, for younger people who have been raised in a more difficult environment. But I mean, but everyone used to say around us at the time, remember to read the Quran for yourself. You don't want to meet your maker come the day and have Allah say to you, hey, what happened to that book, that beautiful Quran that you had in your home, that you were so proud of, that you had on display in a prominent position, and that you would show to visitors every time somebody came? Did you never think to open it and read it for yourself? And so, I had this idea all of my life growing up that this is a book that I must read and try to understand for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So it never felt like I needed courage and to find sort of some superpower in order to be able to do this, at all. It seemed like a duty, in fact. Now I know we all read it, but there's reading and there's reading, right?
And I wanted to ask you this because, I'm a Pakistani and I have to read a translation of the Quran. You're native Arabic speaking. So do you also need some kind of a translation to understand the Quranic Arabic, or talk to
Yeah.
us about that a
Yes,
little?
that's a very, very good question, because there's classical Arabic, of course, and then there's the Quran, which is like a whole other level, of course. And for many, many years, I would read the English and the Arabic side by side. Um, Now, because I'm a native speaker, though, I could see sometimes that the English was a little bit
Oh,
unconvincing.
yeah.
And I'm talking about a number of different translations that are out there and that have been out there for a long time that we all know. So I was able to decipher certain things that perhaps a non-Arabic speaker, you know, they wouldn't be as obvious to them.
Hmm.
But yes, for the longest time, that's what I would do. And until I had read the Arabic often enough that I could just pick it up on its own and just flow with it. But it takes commitment, and I talk about that at the beginning of the book, because we all have a sense of when you read the Quran, because it's sacred scripture, meaning it's God's direct word. It's not inspiration; it's revelation. We always say, right? Which
Yeah.
it is. For us as believers, that's what it is. So we know in our hearts that there's an inbuilt, inherent barakah,
Hmm.
blessing, in reading the words, reciting the words, whether we understand them or not. We know this. It's instinctive in us. But that's not to say that God doesn't want us to try to understand them. All
Yes.
right. and,
Yes.
and this is the difference. And I would catch myself, and I know from my sisters and cousins, etc., because we've discussed this at times. Sometimes we're just racing to get through it, especially in Ramadan, because we want to say, we read it, we read the whole Quran in Ramadan, yay, we
Yeah.
achieved something. But in this race to meet that goal, well, are we taking the time to read it reflectively? And
Mm-hmm.
in the Quran, how many times does Allah say, expressions meaning, for those who reflect, for those who would take the time to consider, to give
Yes.
some thought. And so, I think where the courage maybe came in, though, was in maybe a little bit in deciding to actually attempt to write the book, to share what I had figured out, or what I felt I had discovered through all of the research, etc. Because, like, like, most of us, I was looking for answers too. I
Yeah.
wanted to find out for myself. So I read a lot, I made notes, I have lots of books with pencil markings in the margins and emojis, where I would like something or I would find something surprising, etc. And what happened was, and I think this is also, important, is that I got to a point where I decided, look, Lena, you're not going to be reinventing the wheel.
Mm,
You are not pretending to be a scholar, and you will say so upfront.
mm-hmm,
What you will do is try to serve as a bridge between the scholars who exist and they have addressed these issues, but they have addressed them in somewhat complex manners or ways, because it's mostly written by academics for academics. And it was really a lot of work to kind of read them, decipher them, organize the information. So I thought, well, maybe I can be a bridge between that kind of work and the
mm-hmm,
lay person, the average Muslim woman or man, or Westerner, frankly, non Muslim or other, who
mm-hmm.
is curious and has a need for answers, whether for emotional, religious, or simply intellectual reasons.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
decided I was going to set out just to be a bridge and try to facilitate, make the language easier, make the presentation of the information more user friendly, etc. And to a large extent, that's what I did. But I'll confess that I ended up doing a lot more.
Well, yes, there's a lot of when you go through it, the references and the research is all there for people that actually want to take a deeper dive, or for people like me who just want to read the book and take your word for it that this is the reference and this is the research. So you can treat this book with the level of research that you are ready to, or you feel compelled to do. I find that this is such an important book, though, because as we were discussing, Lena, that in today's day and age, this subject of women's rights is so important, women's rights in Islam. Because as I was sharing with you, I have a lot of students and followers and clients who are young girls living in the West, and they feel very conflicted between the rights that they have, having been born in the West and having been given agency and equal rights and all of that stuff, and their dreams and desires to be all that they can be and reach their maximum potential through education or career or whatever it is they want to do. But then they feel that their identity as a Muslim woman is always in some kind of conflict, and they want to be a good Muslim woman. As shared with you, I was talking to some of my friends, some of my Western friends who are, self-development coaches or consciousness coaches, and they're all authors and speakers. And we were discussing the oppression of Muslim women, and we were talking about it. And I said, the biggest mistake that you guys make when you want to help us is that you think that we as Muslim women want to be rescued from Islam. And nothing could be further from the truth. We love our faith. We love the Prophet of Islam, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We don't want to be rescued from Islam. This is what you guys have to understand. And they were just taken aback. And I said, does the Islamic world right now have some serious issues when it comes to women's rights in understanding that? Yes, we do. Do we need to do a lot of work right now immediately? Yes, we do. Does that mean that it's Islam's fault? No. It's not Islam's fault. It's not Quran's fault. It's, you know, maybe the followers of Islam, the interpretations that have been done, etc., etc. And I find, like you were saying, I feel heartbroken when I talk to some of the young girls or even older women that feel like we are second class citizens in the eyes of God. We're not equal to men, no matter how much we try, they throw these different ayat that are misinterpreted. But there is this mm, deeply conditioned, indoctrinated belief that it's as if God belongs to the boys' club. We were an afterthought, right? It's like, yeah, we don't want men to be lonely, so let's make women to serve them, to pleasure them one way or another, right? I don't know why these balloons are coming up. I have no idea. I have no idea why that happened. But talk to me about that, because I think that is a deeply emotional pain that Muslim women have inside of them.
Mm, mm. Yes, and it's really, when you think about it, it's a very, very strange notion, this idea that women are not quite equal in the eyes of God as men. It's a very strange idea because, we go on and on, as Muslims, about how Islam is a religion of justice, don't we? First and foremost, we say it's a
Yeah.
religion of justice. We scream it from the rooftops, justice.
And
And yet,
fairness.
and yet, why is that justice applied outwardly at global issues, current affairs, and things like that? Why is it not applied within our household? Why is it
Mm-hmm.
not applied to God's creation?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very, very strange notion, and I do address that head on. And I want to say that it's so important, and maybe this is a good moment to talk a little bit about methodology of reading the Quran. One of the things that we've all experienced is, you'll be having a conversation about a particular theme regarding Islam, and someone, I always, the visual that comes to mind always is that of a frisbee. When people grab a frisbee and go, they throw it at you, and I feel sometimes the conversation takes the sort of the feeling of a frisbee session, because people are whipping out this ayah and whipping out that hadith and whipping out this and whipping out that, like this, and you're like dodging, trying to dodge them all. And we really have to stop that,
That's a
because
good
it is,
analogy.
it's also a disrespectful attitude towards the
I
Quran, is
agree.
what I want to say. This firing, like from the hip, or sending off these frisbees as ayat. I mean, it's not a proper attitude towards God's direct word, um, which is what we believe it to be, right? So we must treat this with greater care. And the way I have tried to treat God's word in my book is to say, look, first of all, instead of focusing on a given ayah, or one of the frisbees that people throw out, let's say, for heaven's sake, read the ayahs before it and after it if you don't want to
Yes.
read the whole chapter, the whole surah. At the very minimum, read. And by the way, sometimes, because some ayahs are long, right? So people will pick up a phrase, and I give examples in the book. Like a sentence within the ayah, and
Mm-hmm.
have the respect of reading the entire ayah as a first step.
Mm-hmm.
Then have enough respect for God's word to read the ayahs just before it and the ayahs just after it, to get a sense of the flow, the context, the textual context. We hear a lot about historical context.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
Alhamdulillah, we have a lot of historical context from all kinds of historical sources, hadith and otherwise. But textual context is not something we focus on.
Mm-mm.
And then there's something else, because besides the entire verse and the verses just before it and the verses just after it, let's say pick a topic, whatever topic, and ask yourself, is this the only place in the Quran that God mentions this topic? Are there other places in the Quran where God mentions this topic? And that's an exercise that I do in my book for every one of the 17 topics relating to women that I identified and
I
addressed.
I I want to comment here on this because I think you wrote to the effect that Quran will do its own tafsir. I think you said you wrote something like that, where if you find something, you were talking about, of course, I think Surah Nisa, the ayat 34, but you also say, look what Quran mentions about women here. Look what Quran mentions about the relationship between men and women here. And it's something that I have always said, I have always talked about it, but of course I didn't have the intellectual structure of how to put it together like you do, that you must understand what I call the flavor of the Quran on a certain topic first. And you must also understand that Prophet, may peace be upon him, was a living example of the Quran. And you look at the Sunnah and the flavor of the Sunnah regarding that particular topic, and then you go and read the Quran, and it becomes crystal clear. There is no there is no confusion then, and I love how you actually, I have to admit that this book you can't read in just 2 days. It will make you reflect and ponder. Like at times I had to just go, wow, oh my God, I know this ayah, but I never connected it to this ayah. And ayah, means signs. It's signs of
Mhm.
God. And I was like, this is so profound and so beautiful. And then you just sit down and you absorb that information. It is, like you said, the reverence that you feel for, this is kalam of Allah, it's sacred. It is profound. And I have always said, Lena, when you have sincerity in your heart, Allah never said that you have to be a scholar of fiqh or hadith or usul or whatever to understand Quran. Allah said He made it easy. So then if it is the divine words, it's because sometimes people will object to what I'm saying and they say, well, if you were to read a book of physics or biology or chemistry, don't you need a teacher for that? How can you just pick up a book and understand it? And I say, well, that's worldly knowledge. That's different. This is the kalam of Allah, and the teacher of this book, if you allow it to be, will be Allah Himself. As
Yes.
long as you have sincerity in your heart, I promise you, He will guide you. He will tell you what He is saying in His book. I mean, I'm not holding the Quran, but
Yes.
so when you and I were talking, we talked about this litmus test, and it's kind of a clue in the subtitle of your in the title of your book, which is "No Truth Without Beauty." When I read this title, I knew immediately. I'm like, this is a soul sister, because for me, I have just gone through a rebranding. It's going to launch in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be called Jamali Love. Because I also connect, beauty is such a high value for me in life. And I feel, which was why I came back to Islam, was that Jamal is of course, we know it is an attribute of Allah, it means beauty. And I feel that the physical manifestation of breathtaking Jamal is Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his akhlaq, his personality, the way he was, his uswa hasana. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful. So why beauty? No truth without beauty. Is that your litmus test?
It is the litmus test because, you know, we're talking about God, the origin of everything, our creator. Um, I mean, why would we love God and worship God and want to please God if we thought he was, astaghfirullah, an ugly being?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that he likes ugly things and he wants us to engage in ugly acts and behaviors and associate with ugliness. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So, you know we have to listen to our hearts. Our hearts know when something is off. because this is the one thing that God gave us, that He didn't give all of His other creatures, right, in creation. He gave us the ability to discern.
Yes.
عقل.
To
عقول.
discern aql, exactly.
Yes, it's how many times is ilm mentioned in the
Yes.
Quran, and
Even even in when Allah Ta'ala ordered the angels to prostrate to Adam. At that time also, when they asked him why this, and it was because Adam could name the things and the angels could not. You mentioned that in your book also, right? It was the aql and the ilm
that's
that
right.
was given
That's
to us.
right. So I do want to encourage everyone, to trust their hearts. Your heart will not guide you incorrectly to something. If I mean, this is assuming that you are someone who loves God to begin with, genuinely.
Mhm.
Genuinely, if you love God genuinely, then listen to your heart, because God will not make the ugly appear beautiful to you. In the Quran, I've been fascinated about with so many things about it. Actually, I was writing something about this point just the other day. How Allah says, something like, "It is not I who am wronging you; it is you who is wronging yourself."
Yourself.
Right, and by the same time, because He gave us free will, and so we bring it upon ourselves, whatever it is with the book. So this idea of reward and punishment, for example, it's like, I'm not doing it to you, you're doing it to yourself. But also there's a similar concept, which is when God speaks of uh, because the prophet was very upset, wasn't he, that he couldn't convince everyone of the beautiful truth that he was
Yes.
bringing.
Yes.
And we know that there are occasions where God would speak to him and tell him, it's not your job. Your job is to deliver the message.
Yes.
You think you can convince someone that God has not convinced, and the way the expression is something like the people who do not believe, or the people who do ill deeds, bad deeds. The ugly has been dressed up to look beautiful to them.
Mm.
That's why they pursue the ugly. The
Mm.
ugly appears beautiful to them. And what that is trying to say to us is that if your heart is in the right place, meaning if you truly listen to your heart and you love God, then there is no way you're going to see something ugly as beautiful.
Yeah.
You are only capable as a human being of seeing something that is ugly as beautiful if your niyyah to begin with is not a good one. You
Yeah.
are not interested in God. You are wrapped up in your own ego, in your own nafs, in your own lower self, and you don't want to open up your mind to something higher. Only then can the ugly appear beautiful to you, and then you can pursue it. So we have a litmus test in beauty in a number of different ways.
Yeah. We do. And like in my case, Lena, because I didn't have love for God at that time, but what I had was since love for truth, right? I had love for truth, and I think that's why when I was only 18, why I rejected God was because something inside me was basically rejecting the ugliness, and because it was represented to me as this is what God wants, so I rejected that, not knowing that what I was rejecting was the lie or the untruth. So I had this love for truth, and I was really sincerely seeking for the truth, which ultimately Allah Ta'ala, Alhamdulillah, guided me to. I have a couple of interesting questions from our viewers. Um, oh, thank you, Shaheen. She's saying we're both speaking from our hearts, which we are. So thank you. She's also asking, I often wonder about the extent to which cultural interpretations affect translations of the Quran. If possible, can you reflect on this?
Yes, thank you, Shaheen. I mean, absolutely. There are the interpretations and the translations. They are two different things, but they also overlap because often the translation comes from a certain cultural interpretation. And typically, it's a patriarchal interpretation, or it's an interpretation that was kind of set in stone way back by scholars who meant well, but they had their own agenda at the time. And their agenda was really to try and regulate life,
Yeah.
to try and regulate every aspect of our thinking and our behavior, etc., etc. And that is cultural
Yeah.
because, when Allah says to us in the Quran, you know, say to those who disagree with you, you have your religion and I have mine. Good luck to you. Good luck to
Yeah.
us. Off we go. And he
Yes.
says to the Prophet, don't lose sleep over those who will not be guided, not your job. This live and live, let live attitude.
Mm.
This that was the culture. That
Mm.
was the culture. Remember, the battles and the wars were defensive ones at the
Yes.
time. I mean, we're Muslims here, we know that. We don't have to justify it to anybody. I mean, we all know they were defensive ones and they were necessary. But the culture at the time was not you believe or else, or you do this or you do that or else. I mean, there is some extraordinary sort of incidents of the Prophet's example in this regard, of how lenient and flexible he was when people would come to him with different kinds of problems. So yes, culture is a very, very big, and actually is the main reason. But I don't want to say culture alone, because culture can also imply, this part of the world's culture and that part of the world's culture. But what they have had in common is this patriarchal approach. And this
Yes.
patriarchal approach, to be fair, came out of the Arab world and was exported successfully to a lot of many parts of Asia, that were not naturally as patriarchal, or they were more. I mean, the entire world has always been more patriarchal than not. I'm not pretending. I'm not saying that the West has always been, you know, as relatively open-minded regarding women as it is today, and even today, there's still a lot of problems. But I'm saying that there was a kind of um, uh, narrow-mindedness when it comes to women in particular, which is our subject today,
Mm.
that you found even in reports of conflicts between the Meccan mentality at the time and the Medinan mentality at the time.
Mm.
The Medinan women who had many more liberties. It was a much more open culture even than in Mecca. And
Mm.
the Meccans, it was hard to come into contact with the Medinas and see these relatively liberal sort of attitudes and there is I forget now which of the Sahaba mentions this, but I put it in my book. But there was one of the Sahaba related that before the Quran, what was it? Before the Quran came to the Meccans, he said we used to deal with our women differently. We had more authority over them. But after the Quran came, we could no longer speak and deal with them as freely as we used to, which was a testimony and is a testimony to the fact that there was Meccan resistance. The patriarchal culture of Mecca at the time
Yeah.
was that they didn't like everything the Quran had to say with regards to women.
Um, there was something that you had said. I'm trying to find that, which was really beautiful. It's We have been posting about this. Uh, the Quranic God was a relentless advocate for women's rights, issuing what we today call affirmative action for gender equality. I love that. And the Quranic God was a relentless advocate for women, and the prophet of that God was
Of
also,
course,
I always say the first feminist was really Prophet Muhammad, and it was so near and dear to his heart till the day he died, you know?
absolutely, and of course. uh, Sayyidatuna Aisha was asked what was the character of the Prophet like, and she said his character was the character of the Quran. Because you
Mm.
remember that was his mission, to model
Yes.
it, to it was instilled in him, and he was to be our role model for all time. But with regards to what you just read out, so you remember earlier I was saying we have to also look, if we pick up a theme, any theme, divorce, marriage, inheritance, anything, marital relations, the creation of men and women, whatever the theme is that you are interested in, look in all of the Quran as to where it's mentioned in, the different places, including their contexts, and pull them all out and put them together to get a complete view of what the Quranic stance is on a given subject, right?
Mm.
I said that earlier. But equally, when you do this exercise the way I did it on women's issues, so I pulled out the 17 issues that I identified. By the way, I had no idea there were going to be so many issues. Um, I thought it was going to be the usual 4 or 5 that a lot of scholars have covered already. And this was one of the ways in which the book ended up being different. And it went a little bit beyond just being a bridge, in that I identified like many things that I felt
Can
needed.
I can I just go over some of them right now?
Yes, yes.
Because I see questions. Can you please talk about Surah Nisa at number 34? We not today, we're not going to, but please get her book because Lena goes into it in great depth. And here are some of the topics. And these are not all the topics, but I marked some of them that would be I found very interesting. So the nature of women, women were not created of inferior celestial material. Eve is not blamed from the fall from Eden, and nor are women guilty by association. Um, Women are not naturally conniving, nor are they a constant source of social discord. Women were created with the exact same spiritual and intellectual capacity as men. So, of course, they can lead, they can be leaders. When men deprive women of their free will, they are not protecting anyone, they are obstructing God's plan. And these are all chapter titles that I'm reading. God does not prefer sons over daughters. The nature of women, the rights of women. Women are not meant to be subordinate to men. That's an important one for me, especially. It comes up a lot. Then Lena also talks about inheritance. And no, women did not get the short end of the stick. And then a lot about marriage and divorce. And men do not hold all the cards. The Quran actually levels the playing field through mandated process and etiquette. This is regarding divorce. And then further, there is no dress code for women beyond covering their private parts, as is with men. So this is the one that deals with the subject of hijab and niqab and all of those things. Um, Lena also talks about segregation, which has become really common in Pakistan as the rules have increased. Men and women are always segregating but we kind of all know this. It is such a contradiction. Like when we go to Hajj, when we go to Umrah, we are all together. So as was during the times of the Prophet, there is no restriction on men and women mingling. Then Lena talks about another really hot subject, which is testimony of a woman. So a lot of men that, when I post my videos about one of these topics, this is one of their favorite things that they just say, if you were equal to us, please tell us why is your testimony considered half? And I don't even want to go into that, but now I can direct them to your book. It's like, go read this and you will know. Um, what the answer is to that, because one of the things we need to remember is, I always say this, and I know Lena you also point this out in your book, that what we need to understand, again, this is scripture, this is divine word, while men and women are equal, we should not make the mistake of thinking that we're the same. We are actually very, very different. So Uh, then there are chapters about sexual misconduct, domestic violence, another very hot topic. The Quran does not instruct husbands to hit their wives for disobedience or anything else. Um, and I love this one. There are no 72 virgins waiting for anyone in paradise. You just broke their hearts, Lena. I just did a video on that myself. Like, please stop with your obsession of these houris. Stop it. you know?
So, thank you for reading out those chapter titles. So, I just want to, I know somebody asked about 434.
Yeah,
And
434.
that's it. I just want to say something brief about it because I don't want to think, I want viewers to again, have comfort in the fealty that I have to the Quran. Because what I try to do in this book and say, I just want to look at the Quran for once, because we're always hearing about, you know, what somebody said or what the custom has been like or what the tradition has been. But the Quran has to come first.
Yes.
If there was no Quran, there would be no Islam, right? So let's go back to the Quran for once. Let's have a book that focuses on what the Quran says. Because I don't think God expects each and every one of us to go out and be a researcher,
Mm-hmm.
right? That book was sent as a book of guidance for every single human being for all time, should they
Yes.
choose to pursue it and follow it. That book, he can't expect us to say, oh, and you have to read, I don't know how many volumes of hadith, and oh, I don't know how many. It's just not credible. It's just not. So there's got to be enough in the Quran on its own so that
Yes.
it can stand on its own feet, astaghfirullah, not stand on its own, but so that we can get enough from it directly, as
Yes.
long
As
as
an
we are able
independent
to
source.
read. And there's got to be enough. So that's what I try to do. So with regards to 434, I just want to say, please remember a few things. It's not a one line verse, it's several lines long.
Yeah.
There are 3 or 4 different topics within it.
Yes.
And you will see that, because I have each theme, each women's subject in an independent standalone chapter. So
Mm-hmm.
you will see that that verse comes up in different chapters because it actually, there are several things in it
Yes.
until you get to the domestic violence one. And there I put the whole thing together. So because that's what I'm saying, like you have to look at the whole thing to really
Yes.
then understand what it says. So this is a good example, 434, of how when we fragment an ayah
Yes. Yeah.
and we don't look at other places where the topic is covered, how we can lose our way. And one other example I would love to give, if I may, just
Yes,
briefly.
please.
So the one with regards to testimony and being witnesses. So again, it turns out that there are, I think, 5, if I remember correctly, there are 5 instances in the Quran where the question of testimony is mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
and in the and it relates to orphans, divorce, um, sexual misconduct, debt, and I don't know what else, inheritance or something. But the point is that it's only in one of those cases where the Quran says that the testimony of a woman in that case could be half the testimony of a man.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one to do with financial transactions where there is a debt involved. Because the Quran was now saying, look, from now on, when you take out a debt or you make a loan, write it down. From now
Write it
on, they never used to write it down. So that was one thing. Write it down, and have witnesses, etc. So remember, back then, most women couldn't read and write.
down. Mm-hmm.
Most women didn't engage in lending and borrowing. So even if
Well,
they
and
couldn't
even
read and write,
even to this day, Lena, for women who are homemakers, they have never worked. When it comes to financial matters, they typically will depend on their male counterparts,
right?
husbands, brothers, whatever. and it's understandable. So Quran is issuing a verdict based, and remember, Quran was a revelation, and it was a speech to for basically the Sahaba and what was going on in the prevalent, environment. And please correct me if I'm wrong. So a lot of the things that Quran said, they were almost like foundations that Quran is laying and saying, look, as human beings, this is where I want you to, this is what is fair, this is what is just, this is the foundation. Quran never, like, Quran didn't issue verdicts that was just totally uproot the society and the way it works. I have no idea why these
It's celebration time.
yeah, right. And then you're supposed, as humanity was to evolve, as intellect was supposed to become more sophisticated, we were supposed to go on this trajectory. So Quran was revolutionary. Allah's Islam was revolutionary, that here women were considered chattel, they were considered property, and suddenly Allah is saying, no, they are your equal. They have rights. And now this is what some of the rulings are and Allah's orders, and you're supposed to now move in this direction, giving them more agency, giving them more rights. And unfortunately, the patriarchy came back, and maybe that will be a different discussion why that happened when Prophet ﷺ was so adamant about protecting the rights of women. Why did very esteemed even scholars fail to comply? Like, what happened? And I know a lot of it is, it's not, we won't doubt their sincerity. It's cultural conditioning is so strong. It is such a strong thing. People don't realize it. So I was going to say something else. Yeah, that when you're reading the Quran, because we're very used to reading books the way an academic or an author writes a book, and such as you also did, where it's, you write about a chapter, then you conclude that chapter, and then you move on to the next chapter. Quran is not like that. Quran is, first of all, it's kalam, and it's you will find some of the things in a certain surah, and you will find some other parts of the order of the ruling in another surah. And like you said, you have to understand, what does Quran say about this particular topic everywhere in the Quran. And what you have done beautifully is that, because our brains are accustomed to understanding and reading books in a kind of a systemic manner, you've done that for us in this book. So if we need a particular topic, we go to that topic, we can find all the different ayahs and what they mean, which is lovely.
Yes, it was very important for me that the information be presented in a way so that when you have to go back and find it, you find it quickly and easily.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and that's why there's one chapter on marriage where everything, all the ayat on marriage are included. Same with inheritance, same with whatever it is. It was very important for me to do that. And also, because there's so much information, I then try to give summaries at the end. For example, there are a number of subjects that we would call socioeconomic rights. So I try to kind of do a summary at the end of them, because it's important always to kind of step back and not lose
Hmm.
the flavor, the aroma of the Quran.
Yeah.
If we start saying, analyzing and dissecting an ayah and putting it under a microscope and this and that, fine, but then step back and look at the dish. It's like when you're, this is maybe not a good example. It's like when you're chopping ingredients to make a lovely meal,
Mm-hmm.
and you're so focused on this and that, and this has to be diced, and this has to be julienned, and this has to be that, but then you forget about the whole dish and how you present the whole thing at the end. And then when you sit back and you look at it, and so I try to then do a recap at the end of every section. There are, I think, 5 parts to the book. So one is like socioeconomic rights, the other is women's nature, all the ayat that deal with nature at creation. How did we come about? Were we an afterthought? Were we just sent to be partners to the masculine, and so on? So I try to then group them so that we have intermittent stops to reconnect with the flavor. Where was God going with this?
Mm.
What was in his mind then? And then something that you mentioned, if I can just quickly comment on it, because I thought it was such a good point, which is to say, that the Quran gave a foundation for things and a direction, right? And that's very true because remember, um, a lot of the actual situations and incidents and events that are addressed in the Quran, there are things that were happening, had just happened, were in the habit of happening because there were customs that were, unsavory. Oops.
There
Oh,
we are. So you said you were going to say that you were just thinking about the point, and then I lost you
oh,
after
that's
that.
when I did think you froze a bit. All right. So I was saying that you said something that made me want to say the following. You said something about how the Quran laid the foundation for how certain things
Yeah.
should be and pointed towards a trajectory, right? Assuming that we would sort of get the idea, the principle, or the guidance behind a given thing. And that is very true, and it's something that we also have to remember as we read the Quran, because the Quran very often was reacting to something that was happening at the time,
Yes.
right? A question that had arisen and someone had come and asked the prophet. The Quran comes and answers. Or an incident that had occurred and God didn't like it, like this business of unfair divorce practices.
Yeah.
He addresses that, and so on and so forth. And so we have to ask ourselves the question, and this kept on going, right, for the 23 odd years almost of the prophet's mission, right,
Yeah.
from when he
Yeah.
was age 40 to when he died age 62. So on an ongoing basis, there were ayat coming to deal with specific incidents, especially in the latter years. Like the earlier years were more spiritual principles and morality, and
Taqwa,
yes,
Tawheed.
and connecting us with the other religions also, that this is not a bid'ah, this is a actually a part of the family of God's religions that he had sent before, the same line of prophets, etc., etc. But he sorry, I forgot my line of thought now. Responding to specific events. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, well, what if the prophet had died a year later
Hmm.
than he actually did? Would
Hmm.
the Quran have been silent for a whole year? Or
Hmm.
2 years later, or 3 years later? There would have been situations that would have been arising that would have required some kind of guidance and direction.
Hmm.
And so, the idea that the Quran addressed every possible situation or kind of situation, of course, is simply not true. There's enough guidance in it, moral guidelines,
Hmm.
spiritual guidelines also,
Yeah.
to
Mm-hmm.
be able to help us to go forward, to take it forwards as things arise. So
Yeah.
it's a living, breathing book.
Yes.
It is with us. There is a famous saying in Islamic spirituality: the name is the named. So,
Mm.
when we say Allah, He is here. We are conjuring up His very presence. And likewise, when we read His words, when we read them meaningfully, reflectively, we are conjuring up His guidance, etc. So there is guidance in there. The
That is
foundation
so
is there.
beautiful. As you read, you're conjuring up the guidance because one is not separate from the other. How can you separate God's word from God? That is so beautiful because we tend to humanize everything. So if you have written this book, and by the way, somebody was asking how can we get this book, please, you can get it on Amazon, right? And we will post the link when we post the recording. It will be in the description of this video. And I also want to mention that Dr. Leena has done 5 really great videos explaining some of the stuff from her book. So we will post the link to those videos as well to that channel. And what I really want you guys to do as you're watching this, I'm going to mention it again, that we as Muslim women need to come together. We as Muslim women, when Leena and I first spoke, it was like a sigh of relief because it is so isolating in today's world. You are fighting this fight typically alone. Typically, you're taking abuse, you're being ostracized, and you just keep going because you believe it with every cell in your being that this is the truth and you have to do this. But then you find someone, a sister in arms, who says, I'm with you. I'm going through this too. And I know how you feel. I'm with you. But we all need to now come together. Enough is enough. We've tried the cries of victimhood long enough, and I keep saying this to my followers too. You're not little girls, you're grown women. So we don't get to play that blame game anymore, that men held us back or they oppressed us. Okay, well, all of that did happen, so now what? I have 2 daughters. I have vested interest in saying the buck stops here, and I have to be that example. I have to do something about it. One of the things that I'm doing and I am committed to doing is loving, respecting, and holding up other women, Muslim women that have strong voices. And so how can you, the listeners, do it, whether you're a man or a woman? Support her, support women like Leena who are raising their voice, because this is about going back to justice. This is about um, the way I feel. It's a jihad of truth, of love. It's a jihad of um, the false allegations that are made about Islam. It's about removing those. It's about removing the false allegations regarding our dear Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, whom we love so much. It is a jihad. And so one of the things that you can do to support Leena is to please go buy her book. um, she has it available on Kindle as well. I would recommend buy her book, but if you can't, then get it on Kindle. It's free right now. But once you have bought, please make sure that you write a review, because as authors, all authors need that, and that's how Leena needs your support. And I quickly want to read your dedication, Leena, because I found this very touching, because I also believe in balance. I don't believe in making men our enemy. I believe we have to stay in harmony. They are just as important as women. So the dedication in Leena's book is for women who love God and have always known deep down, or have never doubted, that He loves them back. And then she writes, for men who love God and have always known deep down, or have never doubted, that He is just. So beautiful. I love that you dedicated it to both men and women, as it should be. And, because it is an immature attitude to try to play the blame game. It is also a weak attitude to try to oppress um, a group because you actually feel threatened by them, or you feel insecure without controlling them. So Islam is neither weak nor immature. Islam is just, Islam is wise. It is the book of hikmah and justice. For when I was talking to you in reading the Quran, for me, I realized long ago that because scripture can be ambiguous at times, as you also mentioned. Um, so you need to have like a lens through which you're going to read this book. And as I said, understand the whole subject and stuff. But for me, the lens was always, because I came back to Islam by falling in love with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I saw him to be this, this akhlaq of excellence, of love, of beauty, of justice, of the ethics that we all hold dear as humans, not just Muslims. That was my lens. It was so simple to me. Like, that Jamal is going to be my lens to read and understand the Quran. Whenever I find like this separates me from that Jamal, I automatically know this is an incorrect interpretation or it's not from God. It's so simple, you know?
It really is. It really is.
Yeah, and there's no need for us to complicate and, oh, we need scholars. And I think scholars are wonderful and they have done so much wonderful work, and it's all great, and they're human. Doesn't mean that they can't make mistakes. It is not written anywhere in the Quran that you need scholars to understand the Quran. It is no, I think that is blasphemous to say that Quran cannot be understood without hadith or without scholars. That is blasphemous. Quran can and is understood, just as a standalone message of authority and wisdom and truth. Do you agree?
Absolutely, but at the same time, and I do talk about this in the book. We mustn't throw out the baby with the bathwater in the
I
sense that
agree.
there's so much that Hadith gives us, and that the scholarly works it give us. And to be honest with you, I couldn't have taken the first step in writing this book if there wasn't this body of work by these amazing scholars, especially contemporary scholars, because they're grappling with the same issues that we're grappling with.
Mm-hmm.
And I list them, many of them, or most of them at least, that I know of in my bibliography, and I cite them. I couldn't have taken the first step without them, because also, they have access to the kinds of libraries and the kind of rare manuscripts and what have you, that would be hard for someone like me to access. So they are the foundation for tackling these issues. But what I then try to do is to say, look, whatever we hear from the historical sources, whatever the historical source is, we have to go back to looking at things through the lens of the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot take the historical sources or any scholarly work and say, and we will look at the Quran through this lens. No, no. Does God come first? Or do the people who came after the Prophet come first?
Yeah.
If God comes first, then the Quran comes first. And and that's, and when we talked about litmus test, here's another one. Hold it up, hold anything up, shine the light of the Quran on it.
Mm.
If it holds up, then you know that it's true and it's right. And if it doesn't hold up, no matter who you're told the source is, I mean, many things have been put in the Prophet's mouth. We
Yeah,
know
I
this.
know.
We
So
know
many
this.
people made up hadiths, people made up all kinds of things. The more you dig, the more you do your research, you find that, oh my God, there are problems here, there are problems here also. And yes, the final litmus test is Quran. It will guide you, it will tell you, it explains itself. And, it's interesting. So while I also, like you, I have the utmost respect for so many our scholars, and I tell people I watch, follow, and listen to a lot of them, yet I don't agree 100% with any single one of them. I still use my own brain, I use my own intellect. I try to find the answers myself. So yes, I do get some truth from here, some, and I have brains. Allah has given me akal to use and see, I think I agree with him on this one, but I agree with him, or so far no her, but him on this one. So um, one of the things I was thinking about was that when if we're going to talk about these giants, we do have some giants when it comes to intellect and the reverence that we place on our ulama and the scholars, in the field of fiqh, hadith, usul, they're giants. does that mean that they can never make a mistake? And the answer is no. They're all human. We know that they probably tried their utmost and their sincerest effort. Does not mean that they can't make a mistake. But when this attitude comes up that you cannot question the scholars, and I've found, Leena, that people will do mental gymnastics to affirm or explain away something that their scholars are saying, even when it is in direct contradiction to the Quran. And I asked them at that time that, you know, I'll have to give you this example because my mom was such a great teacher for me. May God, again, I always pray for her akhirah. So when we were younger, so going to all these, we called it dars. She used to go to these events, mahfil, where she would, get dars on Quran. So she was convinced that Quran says a woman is naqasul aql. And she was convinced, absolutely convinced. And I'm like a 12-year-old girl by that time. And I used to argue with her. And I would say, I'm sorry, I cannot accept that. And she would be like, why not? It's God is saying that. Allah made us that way. And I would be like, because I'm the smartest kid in the class. So for me it was like such obvious reasoning that I am the smartest kid in the class. I am not naqisul aql. All the boys are naqisul aql compared to me. So for me it was such logic, and my mom would just be like, no, but that's not, and she couldn't explain it, and then it was always, shut up, because that's what God is saying. And of course later on I brought it to her attention that it's nowhere in the Quran. why would you why would you say that? And I think we have this attitude that we don't want to, we're scared. We're actually scared out of our sincerity to question the ulama because we feel they have done so much research and stuff, and we forget that they are humans. But this questioning of the giants of any field, of the intellectual giants, is the sunnah of the prophets. It's the sunnah
Absolutely.
Ibrahimi.
How well said. How well said.
And so our final litmus test is the Quran. That if it is, because if we are going to say, use the same logic about our ulama and the intellectual giants of our religion, then why change that logic when it comes to other religions? They also have giants and they have written many books and they're very intelligent and intellectual and lots of research. So over there we say, no, we know we are on the truth because Quran, we have God's word. So then why do we change that rule when it is our own,
Yeah.
tradition? Yeah. So I want to read a few things before. I was going to do this in the beginning, but I'm sorry I forgot. But I want to read some of the testimonials for your book. Asma Barlas, who is a professor of politics, Ithaca College, she wrote, readers who think they know all there is to know about Quranic verses that supposedly deny women's equality with men will derive enormous pleasure from Leena El-Ali's work. She reads the Quran both intratextually and contextually, juxtaposing verses so as to yield a more comprehensive understanding of a specific subject. I love that one. And then there's another one. She says, this is a book that the world needs. Everyone in the diplomatic corps and international affairs at large will want to read it. This is by the Norwegian ambassador to Iceland and former ambassador to Iran. Aud Lies, I think is her name, Aud Lies Norheim.
Yes.
And then another one from, I think, one of a scholar that you probably like also. I can't pronounce his last name. I'm going to try, but it's Mustafa Akyol. Mustafa
Actually.
Akyol. I have his book. It's amazing. And he said much ink has already been spent on Islam and women, but in this honest, witty, and erudite book, Leena El-Ali presents something really new and important. A brave overview of all the thorny issues with sharp insights and even new interpretations. With sincere faith in the Quran as well as reverent criticism towards the religious tradition, She shows how gender justice is foundational to a truly Islamic worldview. A must read. I love that. And I agree. It is a must read. It is a book that you really want to have if you are the kind of man who also believes in is gender justice really, and would have daughters that you are raising. If you are a woman who wants to understand her rights in Islam and how the Quran views you, if you have any kind of doubts or confusions that have bothered you about women's rights in Islam. And I am planning on ordering a bunch of copies of this, Lena, so I can gift it to all my friends who are Muslim women and non Muslim women, because I think this is such a great book, because we know now in the West, the feminist movement has done wonders in helping women have agency, but they're also finding the broken parts of it that have rendered men to feel useless. And, so the depression rate in men has gone up so much. And I think this book shows that very balanced treatment of both genders, which I think would be very, very helpful. If you want to add anything before we end this beautiful call, if you have any questions, now is your chance to send them quickly. Go ahead, Lena.
I just want to say that the book is available from any bookstore that you normally buy from, or whether it's online or in person, all over the world. I was
Awesome.
very fortunate to get a big name for a publisher, and it's available everywhere. And I made the ebook free. So the ebook, you can get it on Kindle. If you prefer that, it's free. There's no cost. It's now or forever. It's there. Otherwise, the book, I noticed Aram she kindly ordered a hardback. There is a paperback.
Yes.
There is a paperback, and part of the reason it was very important for me that this book be accessible. And accessible means also in terms of cost, in terms of ability to get it from different countries. So yes, it is available. Just get it, and if you like it, please, as Iram said, um,
Review. Post a review.
please. And if you don't like it, don't feel obliged to post a review.
Yeah, you can keep your comments to yourself then.
And I
I
also
also want to say,
wanted to mention, if I could, that the I did mention it earlier, but because you read it in Mustafa Akyur's endorsement about new interpretations. I really thought I was just going to be a bridge
Mhm.
and simplify complex material and present it in a nice, easy, user-friendly way, and use everyday language instead of academic language. But I want to say, and you all know this in your hearts, that when you engage with Allah in a meaningful, genuine way, and you really are putting your heart and your soul into it, many unexpected, wonderful things arise. And one of the things that happened is that I started to have insights into certain ayat. And I make very clear in the book, and this is what I wanted to get at, where something is my idea, when I suddenly have a new insight and I present it, it's very clear. So you will never be confused as to whether an interpretation is from me or if it's from an existing scholar who would then be referenced, etc., etc. That distinction is kept very, very clear. So there's no mixing and matching, because even though Eram kindly calls me doctor, I am not a doctor of anything, not even of economics. And I just think that's very, very important that so that then you don't feel that it's being all mixed up together. And so where there's no reference, you will see there's a reason why, because I will say this was my insight and this makes sense to me.
yeah, and I think it's very valuable, Lena. I do that too. When I have my own insight, I usually tell people that this is my insight. Uh, for example, calling Allah my best friend has been my insight that I am willing to die for. But And recently, it's so interesting. I'll share it later. Is that let me see. Yeah, um, I was asking Allah Ta'ala for guidance again. First of all, for us to think that all the possible interpretations of Quran have already taken place, I think even that is blasphemous. It's by virtue of being the word of the divine. If the divine is infinite, then this word is infinite. You cannot encapsulate it in human understanding. It's not possible. I don't think till the day of judgment we can claim that, okay, humanity has learned everything there was to learn about the Quran. I think the understanding is gonna keep growing. I had an insight, which I'm going to actually share in a class that I'm doing. We're going to start announcing it soon. As you know, Lena, I have also been a very, 2-decade long student of understanding energy and spiritual healing and the way energy works. And I understand the play of polarity and the divine masculine energy and the divine feminine energy, and how we as women are most powerful when we are rooted in our divine feminine energy. And I'm going to teach a class because this ayah, Surah Nisa, ayah 34, made it crystal clear for me. Uh, Not too long ago, it was an insight, and it was like, oh my God, I know exactly what that part of the ayah, Ar-Rijalu Qawwamuna Lin-Nisa. I'm like, oh my God, this is perfect in explaining the divine masculine and the divine feminine. I'll teach that in a class. So, insights, I think when you are so focused on constantly thinking about God and seeing God in everything, and, you know, trying to see everything as a message from God, I think it is an automatic outcome that you will gain insights about the Quran. And one of the things I wanted to tell our viewers, please let me know in your comments, in your messages, in your DMs. I am also trying to impress upon Lena. I'm trying to convince her that she needs to do a course for us, which we can launch later, where those of us that really want to go deeper in this work and understanding uh, Quran and what it says about women, I think it's so important beyond what we can do in this book, because we can ask questions, we can learn from Lena directly. So we're going to be hopefully launching a course with Lena so that those of us that really want to go deeper can do that. So keep us posted in your. Oh, Natasha sent me a couple of questions. So certain questions are more like, I always get these. They're like a fatwa. Uh, I'll ask you, and then you can choose whether you want to answer this or refer them to a scholar. Can you speak more about divorce? After first divorce given and iddat time is over, can they force you to do nikah again?
Oh, I will say this. When I was writing the chapter on divorce, I was astonished at how complex those ayat were. It took me a very, very long time to work my way through them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's too complicated to answer in 2 minutes. um, I really recommend that you read, if that's of concern to you, just pick up that chapter, go straight to it. I mean, download the book, go straight to that chapter, and you will see what I mean. Because we have messed up the divorce thing in too many ways to recount, and I mean that genuinely. I was astonished at how difficult that chapter was. I thought it was a pretty straightforward one. And then I realized how many things, how much, the extent to which culture had crept in to that particular one. I hope that answer will be satisfactory for now. But all your questions on divorce are answered in that chapter.
Yeah, and like she said, you can just download it quickly. I will say, for those of you that want to support Lena's work, like what I did, I downloaded the book because I want to have it on my laptop, but then I ordered the hardcover because I actually want to support her work. And this is, you guys will see me showcasing and promoting more and more Muslim women with strong voices because, like I said, we need to band together. There is power in numbers, and the time is now. Because, like what Lena said, we could die at any minute. And if I die tomorrow, I want to be able to face Allah and say, I did my best. I did my best to speak the truth, to spread the truth, Allah. And then, you didn't give me more time, but I would have done more. So we, I think it was Maya Angelou who said this, Lena. I'm not sure. And I usually don't try to issue statements with fatwa of hell or heaven, but this one I really love. She said, I think it was Maya Angelou, and she said, there's a special place in hell for women that don't support women. I love it because it has been such an uphill battle for women. And I feel that when I talk to my Western friends who are women, I get so much love and support from them in doing my work. And that's why I feel we as Muslim women really need to show up for each other. We really need to, like when I spoke to you the first day, I said, I am so grateful to you for having done such hard work for me. You did this for me. I am so grateful. And now, how can I serve you? How can I help you? Because we are all holding pieces of the puzzle. And we've all got to come together to make this a whole beautiful picture together. And so, for women especially, and also to those men that resonate with what we were talking about, please support Lena with the ways that we have asked you to. And even if you're non-Muslims, if you're a non-Muslim woman listening, I have a lot of followers in India who routinely write to me and say that we do feel strongly that, we wish that our Muslim friends would not be as oppressed. We want them to have a voice. So support us, share this video with as many people as you can. Buy the book, we're going to post some reels and we're going to post recordings of this. So share this message as much as you can. And let us know through your feedback what you thought. Any last thoughts before we let you go? I can't even believe it's been more than 90 minutes. I promised you that I would stop at 90, but we went past. So any parting words for us, Lena?
I'm just feeling so grateful, really, to you for this platform. I feel like I've missed out on so much for not having come across you and your work before. But inshallah, as you say, we hold different pieces of the puzzle. We're putting together a huge tapestry here.
Yeah.
We're going to write our present as well as our future, inshallah,
Alhamdulillah.
for the
Inshallah.
greater good of our societies, our families, our communities, our societies, our countries, and ultimately the world,
Inshallah.
together. So thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. And thank you to everyone who showed up this evening or this morning, depending on where you are.
Where you are and where you will be watching. Thank you so much again. May Allah Ta'ala keep you in His blessings, in His mercy, in His protection always. Ameen. And thank you to all our listeners as well. And I'm going to try to end this, although I don't know how to because this is my first time using this software. So I think I do it here. No. So I'm just going to X out. Hopefully, save the video.
I'll say salam alaikum then.
Alaikum
Right.
assalam.